Hey folks, in this video I'm going to give you a quick update on what's been going on overnight with the war in Ukraine. There's been some significant land that's been taken back by the Ukrainians here, as you can see on these maps, and it's all through mainstream media. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to make sure that you're not caught up in the narrative of all of these things, because just remember a couple of weeks ago, everybody was talking about how the counter-offensive was going to start in the south down here in Kherson, and all of the troops and forces were massing down there for a potential counter-offensive to happen in this part of the world, which seems to be underway, but albeit in a much smaller capacity. So that's been perpetuated by mainstream media, and it seems like the Russians have picked that up, moved their forces down here. Their forces are down here, they cut them all off in these bridges, and we've seen all the footage of that happening, and now there's 20 or so thousand troops that are encircled down in that part of the world. Now, the Russians have given the order to withdraw from this part of Ukraine because they don't have the logistics or the supply lines to actually cover off on all of those things. And as they're withdrawing, remember, down in Zaporizhia, there was a Russian general that came out who said, if this power plant is not Russian, then it's nobody's. So remember that these threats are not veiled threats, ladies and gentlemen. They are real threats. You have to take these seriously, and you have to take them at face value, not with a grain of salt. If the Russians are saying that that's what they're going to do, you're going to be really super careful of that. Now, I'm not taking back from this fantastic work that the Ukrainian troops have been doing. It's an amazing thing that they've actually done, and I'm sure that it's actually a little bit further along when you look at it. So I'm not sure how updated this map is. If I just move out of the way, you can see it's from a day or two ago, and they do that because of OPSEC, and they don't want to tell you exactly where they are for those operational security reasons. But as we're seeing this play out on social media, I just want to show you a couple of videos here and give you some idea of where I think this is going. So if I play this video, as they're withdrawing from Kharkiv there in the north, you can see the Russians are destroying the substations. They're taking the power offline, and they're causing all sorts of grief for the people that live there. Remember that if the power goes off, 9 out of 10 people will die in the first 12 months. They've turned the power off at the Zaporizhia power plant. Now, as they withdraw from the occupied territory in eastern Ukraine, they're destroying the infrastructure as they go. That's going to cause all sorts of heartache for the locals in that part of the world. And if we look at this video, it shows you a little bit better. You can see the transformer there on fire. You can see the lines. It's clearly a substation that is on fire. And there's no way, there's no physical or possible way that the Ukrainians can repair or resolve that substation problem that they have there in the next 6 months. First of all, it's a war zone. Second of all, they don't just have transformers and all of that equipment sitting around to actually repair it. And even if they did, how long do you think it's going to take to action all of that, to get it to where it needs to be and to make it happen? The reality is you're sort of 6 months away from that actually being resolved or beginning to be resolved. And that's a scary thought, given the fact that we're staring down the barrel of a very cold winter right there in Ukraine. Remember, the EMP strike is the most effective use of nuclear weapons, but part of the strategy of total war from the Russian side of it is leading with space and cyber first. And their order of battle is, first of all, massive cyber attacks, destruction of space-based assets, sabotage of electrical infrastructure, because that is the Achilles heel of all societies. So they're actually actioning the plan that they've set out and said in doctrine. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, in the last 50 years or so, thereabouts, I don't know the exact number, but every time NATO has conducted an exercise where Russians are the Red Force, the Russians, who are played by our side and following Russian doctrine, it always ends in a nuclear exchange. And the reason that NATO are not in Ukraine right now is because of that very fact. And ladies and gentlemen, there's no way that Russia can hold back 25 or 30 countries. They just don't have the ability to do that. No one single country can do that. That's the whole point of NATO, right? An attack on one is an attack on all. And even though Ukraine isn't part of NATO, there's no reason why NATO can't go in there. There's no reason why they can't be part of it. But the reality is they know, the commanders know, that at every time they've conducted an exercise, this ends in a nuclear exchange. Now, what we're seeing here is the precipice of that nuclear exchange. We see massive cyber attacks every day from these Russians. Now we're seeing sabotage of physical infrastructure. And that's just being camouflaged by the fact that they're withdrawing and the fact that it's a war zone. But the reality is they're still following the doctrine that they've set out, which is escalate to de-escalate. And the way that they're escalating right now is destroying the infrastructure because they know that this is the Achilles heel of our society. Just this morning here on Al Jazeera reporting, let me move out of the way so you can see, last reactor at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant shut down. So they've turned the power off, and this power plant is supplying energy to a vast proportion of southern Ukraine. Now, Kharkiv in the east is supplying a huge amount of energy to that part of the world, and these substations being destroyed as a result of the withdrawal of those Russian troops. You got to ask yourself a question: what percentage of Ukrainians are now going to be without power for the foreseeable future in winter? Imagine how inconvenient that would be for you. Imagine how hard it would be if there's no water, there's no sanitation, and especially when there's no heating. Remember, cold weather kills more people than hot weather does. The ratio is something like 34 people will die in cold weather compared to one person dying in the hot weather. Now, it's a serious problem, and if they continue to withdraw, and they continue to destroy the substations on the way out the door, that's going to cause even more problems, which is what they're doing. And remember, the strategy is to escalate to de-escalate. I think I'm moving away from escalate to de-escalate. I think I'm moving towards escalate to win. What they'll do is to win at all cost. I've been seeing a bunch of stories in the media in the last couple of weeks about the Russian economy really suffering because they're unable to get rid of their commodities because they would normally sell that in the European market and in a Western market, and the sanctions are preventing them from doing that. And when you look really closely at all of that, what you'll see pretty quickly is they are in a little bit of trouble. And when you look at that, you stand back and look at that, you will see that what Putin's done is rolled the dice. He rolled the dice and he's thinking that his forces are going to be able to easily roll up the Ukrainians. He's going to be able to easily roll over Ukraine and then continue forward into Europe. But he miscalculated that the fact that they would resist so hard. So what I'm talking about when I'm saying he rolled the dice economically, because the sanctions that have been imposed are now starting to bite. And then his ability to generate more revenue through the commodities that he has is now diminishing significantly. And when you think about it, if he went in there with the intention to win, and he didn't start this without thinking that he was going to win, then he was going to roll them all up. The sanctions wouldn't matter, and he'd still continue on as normal. It would be an ops normal scenario for him with the commodity trading and the ability for Russia to sustain its economy. But unfortunately, he's been shown and been found wanting because he's miscalculated completely the resistance of the Ukrainians and the support that NATO have come together to rally around. So where is all of this going? Well, I've got a couple of tabs there. You can probably see on the top of the screen that are already open. And where I think this is going, I think this is going to escalate perhaps to a way that might be very different to what you think, and it might be very different to what you've heard before. Now, I don't know any of this for sure. This is me just speculating based on all of the research and all of the study that I've done looking at the Russian doctrine and at the Russian arsenal. Now, the Russians have got some pretty scary nuclear weapons, as you can see here. They've got probably the best nuclear arsenal in the world, and they're training to win a nuclear war. But when you think about it, would they ever use nuclear weapons in Ukraine or in Europe? Because they're pretty destructive, and the whole point of taking over Europe and the whole point of re-establishing the Soviet Union is not to destroy the place, but to take it back over and to take control of it. So when I think of what the potential problems might be that he could create for the Ukrainians, if I was a Russian general, what would I think about? Yeah, turn the lights off. That's a natural thing. That's part of their doctrine anyway. Turn the lights off, destroy the substations, and cause them immense hardship in winter because there's no electricity. Now, nobody's fighting in winter, and there's one thing that I know that the Ukrainians don't have, that NATO haven't supplied them, and I haven't heard one single time anybody talking about this or anybody saying that this is what the Ukrainians need. As far as I'm aware, as far as I can see in mainstream media and publicly available information, the Ukrainians haven't been supplied any NBC gear. So there's no nuclear, biological, or chemical suits. They don't have the suits, they don't have the gas masks, they don't have anything. Now, Russia has a very long and nasty history of using chemical weapons. And when you think about it, chemical weapons is maybe a better choice of weapon of mass destruction than a nuke, because it's simply not as destructive. And the Ukrainians are exposed, they're open, and they're vulnerable, and it would be very easy for the Russians to move up some chemical weapons and to use some nerve agents against the Ukrainian troops. It's a scary proposition, and I know no one's talking about this because no one has expertise in mainstream media about nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons, especially when it comes to chemical weapons. But the Russians do. And believe it or not, the Russians have used nuclear weapons before, and they've used chemical weapons before. As soon as I show you these pictures, you'll go, oh yeah, for sure. Remember these two Russians that were in the UK? They were attacked in Salisbury by these two Russians. Yeah, so he was a double agent, and that's his daughter. This guy was a double agent, that's his daughter there, and they came to Russia, or excuse me, to Salisbury in the UK with a perfume bottle full of Novichok. Yeah, they sprayed that. Those two people, this daughter and her dad, were caught in a park, slumped over on a seat, frothing at the mouth. Ultimately, they survived. But remember that these two people have used nerve agents. Novichok is a nerve gas. They've used chemical weapons to try and eliminate people. Yeah? Remember this poor guy? We remember this guy, right? Alexander. Yeah, he ended up looking like this. That's probably the photo that you remember of him. Right? Remember that? That was polonium-210. So they're using nuclear weapons. So these two freaks are using chemical weapons, and whoever attacked this poor guy used nuclear weapons. Remember this guy? Yeah, he was Victor. Remember poor old Victor? Same thing, right? Novichok, he survived, but look what it did to him, right? Pretty nasty thing. When they attacked this couple, the daughter and the dad, they chucked the perfume bottle in the bin, and someone pulled the perfume bottle out of the bin, which was still in its packaging, gave it to their partner, and the partner sprayed it on themselves, and they died. So the Russians have got a history of using chemical and nuclear weapons on the battlefield. Do they need to use something like this, an ICBM, to cause all sorts of problems, or an EMP strike? I would suggest to you no. I'd suggest to you that potentially that's the wrong choice of tool. Remember, these are just tools in a general's arsenal. What is he going to use most to get the most effective result as quickly as humanly possible? Well, an EMP strike is pretty good, but it means nuclear weapons. So why don't we just blow up this place on the way out the door, which is pretty easy to do because it doesn't require nukes, and it's not going to antagonize NATO anymore, but it's still going to achieve the same result. It comes down to that sabotage part of their order of battle in their first strike capability in total war. And that's what they're doing right here. I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that all of what's been going on with this map and all of the mainstream media stuff that got you to focus on down the bottom of the map, down in the Kharkiv, down here in this region here, all of this, yeah, was a feint to get the Russians to come on down here, cut them off, and to open up the eastern part over here, which they've done very successfully. But I also think that the Russians withdrawing from there potentially could be a feint as well, in an attempt to actually use something like this. And it's a well-known fact, ladies and gentlemen, that the Russians have got far more chemical and biological weapons than they do nuclear weapons. They've got 6,000 or so nuclear weapons, and they've got all sorts of tactical nukes as well that they can put in artillery rounds, and different delivery mechanisms and different ways of delivering those tactical nukes. But they've also got huge stockpiles of chemical weapons, and that means nerve gas. Nerve gas, for people that don't know, I'm going to get you to Google that and have a little look for yourself. But it's essentially bug spray for people, and it kills people at scale. And the Russians have got this at scale. And this is not something that anybody's talking about. And as we push these guys back towards the border, back towards Russia itself, what you're doing is you're painting these Russian generals into a corner. You're painting them into a corner where they've got no choice but to pull out these weapon systems and to use them to escalate, to de-escalate the scenario, so they get what their crazy lunatic leader wants them to do, which is to take over this whole place. And if they're using nerve gas to actually get this done, well, that's really not a big deal, because the precedent is here, the precedent is here, and the precedent is here. Ladies and gentlemen, be careful what you look at in mainstream media, and be careful what you look at, what you see is as success. I'm not taking back from the success that they've had there. Well done, good job. But don't take your eye off the ball. Don't take your foot off the gas, and make sure that you take in all of the information that's out there to make your own decisions about what's happening. Don't be drawn into the mainstream narrative of the counteroffensive happening down here when it's really happening over here. All right, that wraps it up for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.